This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, October the 8th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's produced the program. You'll be speaking with David when you give us a shout to get in the queue and on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. And don't look now. Game 3 down in New York last night between the Blue Jays and the Yankees. Up 6-1 early. Looking good. Come on with Seattle in the next series. Not so fast. Couple of errors and a couple of home runs later, and the Yankees take it 9-6. It's one of those games that give you a little bit of an eerie feeling about how the series has so quickly shifted. But hey, get another chance to close them out tonight in New York again. Okay. Just a quick World Series note regarding the Yankees. On this date, October the 8th, 1956, Don Larson for the Yankees pitched the only World Series perfect game. And he was asked how it made him feel. He said, "I'm so happy." That's it. That's all he had to say. So perfect game. No one reached base. 27 up, 27 down. No walks, no hits, no errors. Incredible stuff. All right, just a quick hockey note here. People are waiting for senior hockey to be in full swing here in the province. Look, for the teams to do exactly as they see fit, to spend money on players if they see fit, history's pretty clear. It becomes a problem before too long. So we saw that the Cornbrook Royals have signed former NHLer and a legitimate tough guy, Donald Brashear. And now apparently the Deer Lake Red Wings have signed former NHL goaltender Keith Kincaid. I have no earthly idea how frequently either of those players are going to appear for their respective teams or what sort of financial arrangements are in place. I'm sure the fans are looking forward to seeing former NHLers on the ice playing in their team's colours, but yeah, okay. I'm not so sure how big a deal debates are anymore. For some people, it is really important to see how one political leader stands up to the other, how they can put their party platform against the others, differentiate themselves from the other parties, and maybe, just maybe, land a blow that sees a soundbite appear on the news. So the leaders' debate is tonight. It runs from 7 to 8:30 p.m., uninterrupted 90 minutes, no commercials. So it's a debate-produced cooperation. VOCM, NTV, CBC, and The Telegram. You'll be able to hear it here live on VOCM and Big Land FM's radio network this evening, beginning at 7, running through to 8:30, commercial free. I'm sure, I'm absolutely going to take it in. I don't know about you, but what do you think of debates and how important are they at this moment in time? I'll leave it up to you. All right, so yesterday was the advance poll. And apparently some 25,700 and odd took an opportunity to vote in said advance poll. Okay, I don't know how that number reflects to past provincial elections, but at the exact same time, that many people voted in the advance polls, but it will be today, just prior to the leaders' debate, for the Liberals and the Tories to actually release their party platform. The NDP have long been out there with their costed platform. You know, when asked, both Tony Wakeham and John Hogan say, hey, we've been out on the campaign trail making various announcements throughout the course, and so that will be the items that you'll see eventually in the party platform. I get that. But I don't know how close attention everybody pays to all 28 days of a campaign and listens and takes in every single announcement, because those announcements do not add up to a party platform where you can go to one location and see exactly what one party or another is proposing. So I understand their position that, hey, we've been making these announcements. What do you think's in the platform? But that requires people to follow along extremely closely when it's a busy time of life for everybody listening. You know, we're back to school and the seasons are changing and life is busy and work's omnipresent and everything else in this world. So we'll get a look at the platforms today. I don't expect to see much in the way of anything too earth-shattering beyond what we've heard, but people deserve to have the platforms released, certainly in advance of the advance poll. Your thoughts? All right, a couple of things yesterday that we will talk about. Number one, the NDP rightfully continue to focus on campaign finance and talk about the fact that this province is really an outlier. 8 out of 10 provinces in this country have done away with the wild, wild west of massive corporate and organised labour donations. The Liberals and the Tories in successive governments and successive elections, they have leaned heavily on corporate donations. And whether it be you actually have cash for access, as the NDP are claiming, the optics of it amongst the general population is pretty clear. first thing people say, or the question that they ask when a contract is let is, I wonder how much that company donated to that party. It's always the case. So the NDP, I believe, on this front, are absolutely on the right track. We need to do away with it for all the obvious reasons. And it does indeed, as Mr. Dinsey, make things a little bit easier in the fundraising campaign opportunities when you can lean in on the big donations from the corporations. So I think that's really wise, and I wish all parties would abide by it, personally. And then yesterday we have heard a couple of different things. The Liberals talking about the tech sector. The tech sector, for some unknown reason, kind of flies under the radar, considering the fact that its contribution to GDP is well in excess of $1.8 billion and looking to be targeting $2.5 billion by 2030. Tech is everywhere. It's not just for computer programmers. Just about every company, every business, and most every household has an aspect of tech and innovation right there. So, okay. And they're talking about a strategy to ensure funding programs meet the needs of the sector, centralize support available, create a task force, put the priority for government when crown corporations are going to the market to focus on local technology partners, which always makes sense in the world of government procurement, whether it be provincially and or federally. They also talk about the role that tech can play in defence and Arctic sovereignty. Look, we do have the base at Five Winged Goose. We do indeed have Bull Arm that can indeed play a role for maintenance and what have you with the Victoria-class submarines. So tech requires, and I think deserves, a little bit more attention. Mr. Wakeham and the PCs continue to focus in on the skilled trades and jobs. So we've heard about building 4 ferries here for the interprovincial ferry system. We've heard about the benefits agreements for if and when Beta Nord gets off the ground, whether or not the Upper Churchill and Gull and all those types of things, but also talking about access to exposure to the skilled trades when you're in high school. I'm pretty sure it's an elective for high school students throughout the province in about maybe over 100 high schools, around 75% of the high schools in the province. Mr. Wakeham wants to make sure it's available for everybody. So again, we can day by day, harken back to yesterday's announcement and try to piece together a platform. But those are some of the things that have been on the leaders' minds as of yesterday. You want to take it on? Let's go. And as the Canada Post strike drags on, unfortunately, when I was told that people could get their GST check at the post office, it's not true. My bad. Now, that's what I was told, and of course, now all of a sudden, it's not the case. So don't think about it. Don't do it. The only check's going to be mailed out are a socioeconomic check, social assistance, and otherwise, but no GST check. Another interesting one, as brought forward by a Twitter listener, is if you renewed your MCP card online. That's a good question. So it has been mailed out. It's through no fault of your own. So how sticky are some clinics going to be regarding the fact that you may have an expired MCP card? That's a really good question. I think the onus is on NL Health Services to give direction to hospitals and various clinics that if you show up with an expired MCP card, we should be able to have access to MCP's portal to just show and to verify, look, I did the right thing. I renewed my MCP card. I haven't received it in the mail, but there you go. So talk about that, no problem. I've also been asked, and I guess this just comes from a conversation, whether it be at a coffee shop or amongst a group of friends or in some particular communities, but I've been asked, when is the new rural property tax going to be implemented by the government? That's not a thing, though. And so I'm glad someone emailed about it, because all that really happened was when they amended the legislation, it allowed for municipalities to apply a property tax, to apply a business tax. The government isn't directing them to do that. And then there's exemptions for agricultural property and what have you, housing. There's some exemptions and housing amendments that have been included in that legislation, but there is not a wide sweeping general rural property tax to be implemented by the government. That's certainly nothing that's been said, and the legislation does not indicate that. But it's been a pretty popular email subject over the last couple of days, so that's the case there. Also, and I get this reference every now and then, it's about first responders and their ability to find you where you are in so smaller, more rural, remote communities who, for some of them, don't have civic addresses. If I was a resident to one of these communities and worried about that, because let's just say you called 911 and you need an ambulance dispatched, not every dispatcher or every ambulance driver or paramedic can distinguish between it's Nanny Green's house 3 doors down from the white picket fence in the corner of da-da-da. That's probably not good enough. So you can encourage your leaders in incorporated communities and unincorporated communities to simply go to the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador's 911 division. They'll send you out a kit, and when the numbers are registered, it'll be part of the government's 911 dispatch system. So I hear that all the time, and if I'm a resident, I'm encouraging my leaders to please take advantage of that. It's a pretty fundamental process. Just go right to the 911 division and get the kit, and there you go. You get the data, the maps, the spreadsheets needed to update what they call the next generation 911 database. So anyway, there you go. All right, what's this? Oh yeah. Interesting story from Rob Antle and the folks over at the Seed this morning regarding harkening back to the Green Report, the Premier's economic recovery team. We were told it was a critically important examination of the fiscal realities of the province and a potential pathway forward, whether it be some of the recommended privatization issues and selling oil equity assets, but a keen focus on the financial stability given the debt and deficit. Here's a quote, and good on Rob for putting this together. Here's a quote from May the 6th of 2021. "We can right the ship, but we have to face facts." And the facts were, just remember, back to when Premier Ball was reaching out to the federal government because the thought was that maybe, just maybe, we couldn't make payroll. And, there was thought we could not secure long-term borrowing, which turns out we did make payroll and we were able to secure long-term borrowing. There's also reference in the story, and I didn't get a chance to read too deep into it, but when we look at numbers regarding the total debt of the province, I assume this includes a bunch of pension liabilities and, yes, the level of debt that we already are suffering and smothering under. But again, no pathway forward. It just feels like, well, we'll just keep borrowing, or if things go terribly bad, then we'll just rely on the federal government. That could come with some pretty harsh restrictions. So, again, for all the political leaders, I know Jim Dinn's talking about, getting to surplus at the end of the term if the NDP were successful in this particular election, but no real understanding about how we're going to deal with this. Again, for all the things that people need and want, if we're spending $1 billion plus per year simply to service a debt, not to chip away at the net debt, to service the debt, it's obviously unsustainable. And so good on Rob for putting back on the front burner that particular issue as it pertains to the Premier's economic recovery team led by Dame Moya Green. So I thought that was important. How about you? All right, so there was a trip by the Labrador Island Link overnight. Didn't impact all customers, it impacted a huge swath of customers of Newfoundland Labrador Hydro. And of course, they produce about 90% of the electricity consumed on the island. And of course, the Labrador Island Link bringing Muskrat Falls power to the island and down through the Long Range Mountains, Soldiers Pond, you know the deal. Yesterday, extensive conversation, extended amount of time with Mike Wilson. Mike was one of the first three appointed to the independent oversight panel looking at the Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding. And you all know the deal. He resigned for a variety of reasons. The impaired independence of the panel itself and a variety of other price, cost, value concerns. Today, and thankfully, the CEO of Newfoundland Labrador Hydro, Jennifer Williams, will join us on the programme to speak to some of what Mr. Wilson, or the points that Mr. Wilson made. It is important to note that during caretaker convention, through this campaign, I don't think we're going to be able to get response to specific people or specific parties or what have you, but we can indeed and will talk about some of the concerns that have been voiced. And you can pick what you think are the most important issues that we must deal with Jennifer Williams this morning, and we'll do our level best to incorporate it into the conversation, given the fact that we're looking at 50, 60 years worth of ramifications regarding what is still a negotiation. An MOU is not binding, but people have concerns. And so we'll try to get as much information as we can so that you are indeed informed as best possible. All right, how are we doing out there, Dave? We've probably got a lot kicking around because we had an interesting show yesterday. All right. So I heard Bill Sterling from the Real Estate Association talking about just how expensive homes are getting here and the bidding war for homes, and you hear it all the time. Then you look at the national conversation, and we did away with apparently the Housing Accelerator Fund, and now we're relying on Build Canada Homes. A keen focus of it will be modular homes. It has been a failure in some areas, but it has been extraordinarily successful in others. So again, we're not reinventing the wheel. If we look at the Swedish model or the Japan model, both countries have been doing this for decades with great success. So there will be concerns about the companies that get the contracts for building these modular homes, and they have to be designed to the point where people actually want to live in them. But we've been talking about modular homes and tiny homes on this program for a long time. You know, if we continue to lean on the traditional build of single detached homes, we'll be forever and a day to build the amount of homes or the number of homes required to hit what are the targets. 4.8 million homes, so say the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, to be built by 2030. And that's not only about access, it's also about affordability. So housing here, whether it be a lot of the strings and the hurdles that have to be cleared at the municipal level, but we really got to get a bit more detail. And apparently Build Canada Homes isn't going to kick into full swing until next year, but the need is today. And there's a variety of reasons why. And we can include the immigration conversation on that front, because that's part of it. Absolutely is. Of course it is. All right, a couple of very quick ones before we get to you. Oh, and today is Election Day here in the city of St. John's. We'll have a lot of coverage here on VOCM for your consideration later on this evening. And a couple of quickies when referencing the Prime Minister's trip to the Oval Office yesterday. No word as to whether or not there's been any relief granted regarding the tariffs specifically on steel and aluminum, which currently sit at 50%. It's not only a problem for producers here, it's been a huge problem for consumers there, south of the border, at the corporate level and all the way through the consumer. So we don't know. But what is curious, out of left field for me anyway, is reinvigorating the Keystone pipeline, Keystone XL pipeline potential from Alberta into the Northwest. So I think it's from Hardisty, Alberta into Nebraska. The Obama administration nixed it. In Trump's first term, he brought it back on track. When Biden got elected, he axed it. Now, and of course, we've heard the president say he'd like to see that built. And now apparently Prime Minister Carney is talking about the possibility for it. And at the exact same time, out in Alberta, of course, Premier Danielle Smith putting forward what she calls a stress test for Canada as to whether or not the government is going to capitulate to demands regarding, overriding BC jurisdictional authority to see a pipeline built from the oil sands, a bitumen pipeline to the north coast where there's a tanker ban in place. So there's a big load of demands, and saying it should be on the major projects list. But also, where's the proponent beyond the government of Alberta? I think that's an important question, because if we're talking about shovel-ready projects, it's not. There's not even a proponent talking about it other than the Premier. So, again, just consider. People rightfully consider whether or not Quebec should be allowing a bit more access to the grid and the free flow of energy, whether it be for pipelines or electricity or whatever the case may be. Just paint this picture. And I wish that was the case. And that would change everything. Just paint the picture of, let's say, a Quebec proponent said, we'd like to build massive offshore wind off the coast of Labrador and bring that power through Labrador into Quebec and to supply their markets. We'd say, what? What are you talking about? So I think it's a similar conversation, and that stress test in Alberta is real. In addition to that, the Premier of Alberta keeps getting asked about Alberta's sovereignty and contends that she's not doing that and it's not her doing that. It's her doing that proposed legislation that lowered the bar dramatically for petition signatories to force a referendum. So there's a lot going on out there that some of it, of course, is nonsense, but some of it, of course, is obviously extremely important. All right, we're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. We're going to talk about aquaculture, healthcare, whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. I meant to mention this off the top, and this is not a commentary offered about exactly what's going on, people's personal political stance on the conflict, the war, the ethnic cleansing, or the genocide in Gaza. But there are 3 Newfoundlanders who, by all accounts, have been detained and people might refer to as abducted by Israel. They were part of one of the flotillas. So that's Devoney Ellis, Nikita Stapleton, and Sadie Meese have not been heard from. So regardless of what you think, it's probably pretty important to reach out to your elected officials to voice your concerns if that is a concern that you share. So I meant to say that, and here we go. Let's begin this morning on line number 1. Good morning, Sharon. You're on the air.
Hi. Good morning.
Morning.
Yep, Sharon Pickett. I just wanted to let your listeners know that our protest against this excessive amount of salmon die-off coming into our community, we're having a protest this morning, 10 o'clock, at the intersection of Maidstone, St. David's. And I encourage anybody in the area who is dealing with this and experience it to come out and support us.
Sharon, and fair enough, and hopefully people do, but paint a picture of what you're seeing in your community regarding the mass die-offs, and whether it be the smell or the amount of trucks up and down the road. Just paint us a picture here, what you're seeing.
Well, there's up to 10 tractor-trailer loads a day going past my home to New World Dairy, to the anaerobic digester. The wind, usually constantly every day we have the smell, but like when the wind is northwest is our most prevailing wind, and that's when we're most affected. And like we can't breathe, we can't go outside. Like people have moved away from the area because they don't have a quality of life here anymore. And like this was known as a big tourist area, and like even people as far away as the Trans-Canada Highway and at the Irving up on the highway are getting the smell, like all areas, and people have to drive through the area where the smell is so intense, like driving through it, you know, it make you want to throw up. It's so intense. And like with all these die-offs, and they're saying it's caused because of global warming, if that's the case and they're trying to expand this, what effect are we going to have? Like, what effects is it going to have on our area? And now, this die-off that took place in August, this waste from this is supposed to be trucked into the community until the end of October, the middle of November. Now, in the last week, they've announced that there's another major die-off, and as usual, the numbers are lower than what they actually are till it comes out. So, like, what's the recourse? Like, government didn't have a plan for this and for the extent that this is. And as far as I understand, the only areas where this is being disposed of is Burjo at the fish meal plant, who are dealing with the same thing that's impacting them severely. Like one man's B&B down there, he has all the gurry and blubber in and around his wharf. You know, people are the same as we are. You can't go out in your yard for a walk. You can't do anything. You can't open a window. You can't hang clothes on the line. And like I said, tourism ads from the government of Newfoundland shows children running free in the fields and windows open with the curtains flapping in the breeze. And, you know, like, we're denied everything. We're denied even open our door to go out. Like, yesterday I had to go take my garbage out, and I knew how intense the smell was. And just the thought of taking out my garbage, like, you know, like, that's not something you should even have to think about. Like, can I go take my garbage to the can? You know, it's so wrong. And everybody in environment and government and these agencies are ignoring our concerns. Like, we went through this and went public in 2019. Department of Environment did nothing to address our concerns. And I suggest what's happening here now is worse than 2019.
It certainly sounds like a terrible predicament, you know, and the questions long term is if it's issues with warming water and the lack of inflow and rain to, you know, encourage the currents and all this kind of nonsense, and the lack of oxygen or oxygen depletion, there's no reason to believe it's going to get better into the future. So it is important for the government to acknowledge what's going on here and discuss the topic. You know, I don't know if we're going to see even a business model cost benefit from some of the agriculture companies, because it's costing them an arm and a leg as well. So when you analyze how much it might cost to move the operations on shore, and then consequently have all the controls right there with the provision of oxygen to regulate the temperature of the water, to have a better control of sea lice, if all those things are going to be much more costly to operate onshore, I'd be surprised. So I'd be curious to hear what's going to happen into the future with agriculture. And look, I know it has been an economic saving behavior for many communities. I know that to be true. Sharon, give the details of where they went for the protest one more time.
We're holding it 10 a.m. at the intersection of Maidstone, St. David's, and we have to get the points out there, and like your comments, what you just said, the residents of Bay St. George South can be likened to the salmon that are in those pens. We are denied oxygen. We are exposed to chemicals, toxins, whatever, disease, and no one is listening. And this is not a small thing. This is an extreme. 10 tractor trailer loads a day, trucked 605 kilometers one way from Hermitage Bay to Maidstone. What is the environmental impact of that alone? Government closed all the local, provincial incinerators, garbage incinerators, because of the environmental impact. What is the environmental impact on this? And there's not one person in government. My opinion, the Liberals approve this. They've just approved 3 more extension on the South Coast and 3 more inlets closer to Burgeo. PCs are supporting it because Tony Wakeham was at a conference and heard on the news. He's saying it's supporting 2,500 jobs. Like I said, I don't believe it. Maybe the 2,500 jobs is created by cleaning up this garbage. And the only one who has given us any bit of support and encouragement is the NDP. And when this die-off happened in August, I heard Jim Dinn on your show speaking against it. And these are people who work in biodiversity and understand what this is doing to the environment. Nobody in government knows what this is doing to our environment. And it's not only on the South Coast and what it's doing to the wild salmon. It's what it's doing to the residents of each area here, Bay St. George South and Burgeo. Our quality of life is taken away. And it's time for somebody in there to have the guts to stand up against this. And I'm not voting Liberal or PC. I know Hal Cormier met with us, and he was sympathetic. He smelled it. He witnessed it. But if his leader is accepting it and saying it's okay, well, that made my decision, right? And we haven't heard anything else. So, we appreciate anybody's help to bring attention to this and see if somebody will act and we can get something done.
I appreciate the time. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I appreciate the time to be able to voice our concerns.
My pleasure.
And
Good luck.
TV is supposed to be covering our story today, so hopefully we'll get the word out to somebody who cares.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, let's get a break and don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5, second one to the Executive Director at Trades NL. That's Bob Fiander. Bob, you're on the air.
Hi, Paddy. How you doing?
That's kind. How about you?
Not too bad, bud. I'd like to talk about the Beta Nord topsides this morning, Paddy, if that's all right.
It is. Before we get into that, Bob, just let me ask you a question. Because, at one point in history, endorsements were a big deal, whether it be high-profile individuals or organized labor or whatever the case may be. So what's the process at Trades NL to come up with an eventual decision to endorse Tony Wakeham and the PCs? Do you have an informal poll of your members, or is that made strictly at the executive level? Just talk us through how you arrived at it.
For sure. We have a collective body there, a board of business managers, and they are the directors of Trades NL. And we brought all the information back that came back from the parties, and we took a private vote in among the 14 business managers, and it was emphatically to support Tony Wakeham and the PC party because of their platform.
Fair enough. People asked me the question, and I had no real idea exactly how it was arrived at Trades NL, so I thought I'd start there. And now we can move off into the top sides. What's on your mind this morning?
Sure. So the three parties have responded to the question on the top sides, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to read the question and then quickly read the answers from the leaders.
Okay.
Maybe all right? So the question was, will a government led by you commit that if Equinor wants to extract the benefits of the people's resource, that significant level of topsides construction occurs in Newfoundland and Labrador by Newfoundlanders and Labradorians? So the Liberal Party response was this: the Liberal Party believes strongly that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians should benefit from the development of any of our province's valuable natural resources. This includes oil and gas projects. A Liberal government is committed to seeing that construction/fabrication take place here at home, wherever possible, and be carried out by Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. So I have an issue with the wherever possible. I guess, wherever possible is a bit ambiguous, and it could be, maybe it's not possible. Jim Dinn, NDP, it was an emphatic yes. There's no need to have construction carried out elsewhere in the world when we have trained and capable workforce and facilities here for construction. This isn't about fairness, it's about smart economics. Trades NL research shows the economic benefit of minimum construction thresholds. When Newfoundlanders and Labradorians build our province, everyone benefits. Exactly what you'd like to hear from leadership. Tony Wakeham and the PC Party, a PC government under my leadership, will work to make sure that the Beta Nord project proceeds and to make sure that a significant level of construction occurs in Newfoundland and Labrador. Trades NL has recommended benchmarks for resource development on oil and gas projects and hydro developments in Newfoundland and Labrador. I am committed to working with union leaders to incorporate these recommendations into a modern and revised benefit agreements used for resource development projects. Again, Paddy, emphatic yes, exactly what you would like to see from leadership in this province. And I'm going to jump into what an argument is that the developers try to make these days is the life of field argument. Well, the life of field argument has flaws, Paddy. We've seen recently in the news with ExxonMobil slashing 2,000 jobs across the country, Newfoundland and Labrador is going to be affected there. So there is no certainty in the life of field. We can't look out 10 years or 15 years and know what's going to happen. So we don't have the certainty of life of field, but what we can be certain about is construction levels on these resource projects. We know what we got going in, and to be honest with you, all of the projects that we've done in the past, we took part in the construction and we took part in the life of field. We're there on the fabrication, the construction, the integration work, operations, maintenance. So that's how you win in this province. We get a piece of all of it.
Bob, you would be intimately familiar with what life of field is, but are you referring to, that's the regulatory framework that begins with exploration and all the way through abandonment, all the way through decommissioning. So environmental protection, safety standards, like all of that, that's what you're referring to as life of field?
Well, look, Paddy, we always tend to get wrapped up in the life of field because we're getting cut out of this work, and so they're trying to sell it then. The life of field is good for this project. We need to construct the work home right here, Paddy. We've done this work in the past. I'm getting tired of saying it. Like, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians deserve to go to work on these projects. There's no question about it, and we should have leadership in this province not saying maybe. We should be saying we are going to develop and construct.
Fair enough, and I understand your position on this one. This is not really directly associated with what we're talking about, but it is always a question for me when we talk about why we're so hell-bent for leather to have an equity piece of an offshore oil development as opposed to royalties and super royalties, because with an equity stake also requires a responsibility at the end of life. Abandonment and decommissioning of an offshore oil field is not cheap.
No, for sure, but what we've seen in the Hibernia project in years gone by, the federal government took an equity stake in that project, and it put a lot of people to work in this province, kick-started the offshore construction industry, and now the benefits that have been reaped from that on the federal government and provincial government side from royalties, probably the best decision was ever made.
Yeah, and of course, little different circumstance. Had the federal government not intervened at the time, there might not have been a Hibernia, right? So,
well, That's exactly right, Patty. And something that's what we'd like to see here now. Maybe federal government intervention and an equity stake and put people to work in Newfoundland and Labrador. We're talking about nation-building projects. Beta Nord could be a showcase for that, for sure.
I appreciate the time as usual, Bob. Thanks a lot.
Well, Patty, I want to leave you with this. I think tonight in the debate, the question should be asked, and it should be a pointed question. Each of the party leaders, do you support the construction of the top sides of the Beta Nord right here in Newfoundland and Labrador? Let's see what they got to say.
I appreciate it, Bob, and I would imagine that type of question has obviously got to be on the agenda. I have nothing to do with the questions tonight, but I can only assume jobs and natural resources will be part of the conversation. I appreciate your time, Bob. Stay in touch.
Absolutely. You're certainly reaching 50 or 60,000 people a day here, Patty, so that's a warranted question.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants to know.
No question. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. I can only imagine natural resources and consequentially employment opportunities have got to be part of it, which, will lead some people to continued concern about jobs if and when an MOU becomes a variety of definitive agreements or contracts. It's going to be a big question. Even if you just look at Gull specifically, if Hydro-Quebec is taking the responsibility and assuming the risk and liability, and the pre-work that, engineering and design and otherwise will be done in Quebec, it does beg the question about how jobs upon or during construction phase, what that actually looks like. Because we keep being told it's a similar agreement to benefits at Muskrat. It was qualified members of the Innu Nation, then the rest of Labrador, then the rest of the island, then the rest of the country, then the rest of the world. Because we do know Quebec and Hydro-Quebec have been very protective over jobs. Let's get a break in. When we come back, plenty of show left for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the Mayor of Burgeo. That's Trevor Green. And good morning, Mayor Green. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you today?
Not too bad at all. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. I'm calling in today just to bring some light onto a possible idea, I guess, that the town of Burgeo has. So it's been brought to our attention that there's, I believe it's 20 or so whales in Marineland that need to be relocated due to the fact that they're still in captivity. There was an option in Nova Scotia which ended up falling through. So it was brought to our attention that, we might have an ideal situation here. So we have a cove here now, Ha Cove. I think it's a great spot. It's natural conditions, sheltered waters. It's abundant fish. Its proximity to Burgeo and fishing and agriculture. Basically, I guess we're calling in today. I just want to bring some light to it. I know a lot of our government representatives listen to your show, and so they should. You get to connect with your people and hear what the problems are. So, like I said, right now it's just a plan. It's just in very early talks, but it's something that we certainly would like to consider and look at seeing if it's even feasible and going forward with it.
I just want to make sure I'm familiar with what we're talking about. So are we talking about marine land in Ontario where they're threatening to euthanize some 30 beluga whales? The government has refused to fund some export of them. So that's what we're talking about?
That is what we're talking about, yeah. So basically the government decided not to fund them to go to China just because they would be back in captivity, and that's not what they want, right? So this would give us an opportunity to have a great, Newfoundland could lead the country in marine stewardship and rural innovation here. So,
well, there's certainly plenty of beluga whales off the coast of this province and up into approaching the Arctic. So you say the conversations are early. Give us a bit more information about what kind of conversation, what kind of reception you're getting.
So right now, we like I said, it's still very early. We've sent some letters off to Mr. Hogan, Mr. Wakeham, Minister Thompson, and as well as Carol Anstey and Michael King. We haven't heard back from anybody as of yet. Understandably, I know we're in the middle of an election, so that kind of puts things on pause a little bit. And we've also been in talks with some other investors and stuff that are willing to help support and fund some of this. So ASF is one of those. They were the ones that actually brought it to our attention and said, hey, here's a great opportunity, something that I don't even say would come along once in a lifetime.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It's also a little bit of an odd story. Have you also, in addition to reaching out to political leaders and the folks at Marineland, do you have any real understanding about the logistics of transporting whales to your area? Because, of course, you can put whales into the wild. There's no guarantee that they won't end up in the South Coast fjords as opposed to where you'd like them to be for tourism opportunities or what have you. So any logistical conversations being had?
Not as of yet, Patty. Like I said, we're still very early conversations. Yeah. I'm hoping over the next couple of weeks to try and get some more information and be able to speak to it a lot better than what I am today. But no, we haven't had those conversations as of yet. And
this might be a silly question, but what are you hoping to achieve? Let's just go down the road and say that this gets done. What do you think it would mean to your community?
I think it would be huge for our community. Obviously, there would be a few jobs related to it, I would assume. And just part of Burjo's town plan is tourism. And what a way to bring tourism to Burjo and South Coast of Newfoundland. People often pay big money to go on a whale watching tour and don't see anything, and you could pretty much come to Burjo and be guaranteed you're going to see something.
Well, people come from all over the world. We take things for granted here, like to see a humpback or be in the St. Vincent and see a humpback, or to be on the South Coast and see a beluga in the fjords. We just think that that's very normal and everyone gets that experience. It's not true. People come here for 100%. That and that alone.
Right, and I definitely think it would bring a big spotlight to the South Coast of Newfoundland.
Yeah, it probably would. I'd be curious to hear what the next round of conversation sounds like, and evaluating the potential or the possibility for this to even happen, and what has to be involved for this to happen. So this kind of came out of left field for me. I am familiar with the story at Marineland itself and the government's refusal to pay for any transport or export of those belugas, and I don't know where it stands today. But please do indeed, when this evolves, let me know.
Oh, most definitely, yes. We'll definitely call back in and give everybody an update on where we're at.
And this is not intended to be saucy, but what would you say to someone who says, this is a crazy idea?
Well, to be honest, I don't think it's crazy. I think it's an incredible opportunity for Burjo, the South Coast, Newfoundland, and Newfoundland as a province. And like I said, it's a great way for Newfoundland to lead the country in marine stewardship and rural innovation. And offer these whales a sanctuary where they don't have to be euthanized.
We'd be part of the good news story, because euthanizing 30 belugas is the bad news story currently being discussed in the province of Ontario. How does this dovetail with the conversation regarding the proposed National Marine Conservation Area?
Yeah, so we have reached out to Parks Canada. We haven't heard back yet to see if there's interest in this at all. Obviously, I think the two really kind of go hand in hand. To have a marine conservation area and the beluga sanctuary, those two really do coincide with each other. But again, to Parks Canada, if they want to be part of that or not, I don't know.
Yes, and of course, then you'd have to square that circle between the relationship of aquaculture and the possibility for the conservation area and the possibility for beluga. So there's a reason why there's nothing easy in this world.
Oh, you're telling me.
Mayor Green, I appreciate the time. Keep me in the loop.
I will. Thank you very much for the time today, Patty.
You're welcome. All the best. All right, bye-bye. There you go. I didn't see that coming. But anyway, let's keep going. Line number 2. Say good morning to the independent candidate running out Mount Pearl Southlands, Paul Lane. Paul, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
Too bad at all. How about you?
I'm best kind, sir. That was a very interesting conversation. I wasn't expecting that one either.
No, me neither. I don't even know if it's realistic, but if it's worth chasing, if he thinks it's a potential boon to the area, why not?
Hey, listen, no harm in exploring it. Patty, I just wanted to speak with you today, and we've sort of talked about this stuff before, around the whole concept, I guess, of community safety. We all know that I think, the priority issues that you hear from people all the time, at least I do, is the issues around cost of living and healthcare. There's no doubt that that's right up there for sure. But another one that I've heard a lot at the doors going around this time around, and perhaps it was spurred on by those couple of unfortunate incidents that happened in our community several months ago. But it's the whole issue of community safety and policing and the drug problem that we have in our province, including here in Mount Pearl. So I just wanted just to speak to it again. And first of all, there's no easy solution to this stuff, especially when it comes to the drug issue. And I understand that, but one of the things that I and others have called on for the last couple of years for sure in the House Assembly, I know Helen Conway Ottenheimer and myself and others, is the fact that we don't have enough RNC presence and RCMP as well in the rural areas to deal with the crime. And we've called on the government to act in that regard. And of course they'd say, oh well, we just hired 30 officers, but there's no point in hiring 30 if 29 of them just retired. So that gives you a net benefit of 1. And now I'm hearing the government, I'm pretty sure I heard in one of their announcements talking about, I think the Premier said 80 to 100 officers, somewhere in that neighbourhood. I don't want to put out false info, but it was a significant number of hires, I believe they said, that was required. It's amazing to me that it's required now. It wasn't required 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, when we kept raising it and we're saying, oh no, we got lots of resources, all of a sudden we don't. But I think that we do need to look at the policing levels in our province, both in rural areas with the RCMP and certainly here in my area and the metro area when it comes to RNC. I also agree with Helen when she talks about the need for bail reform and to deal with this whole catch and release situation that we have with some of these, especially when it comes to violent and repeat offenders. But the other piece around the drugs, and this is a big problem, and never before since I've been in Mount Pearl have I heard so many people now commenting about the fact that they're finding syringes and stuff on the walking trails, near the playgrounds and so on. Is not something we ever had to deal with. I know you did hear perhaps more of it in certain areas of the city of St. John's and the centre city area and so on. Now we're starting to have that problem, certainly here in Mount Pearl and throughout the province. It is a big concern for sure. And, when it comes to those issues, I think it's not just policing that needs to be involved there. I think we need to address the issue of addictions that we have in the province. And, that relates to not only having places like the new place that's out on Salmon Line, which I think is a great thing. It's too bad that private industry had to come forward to the government versus government taking that initiative on its own to try to get these places in place, but at least we have one now. But also, once somebody goes to a drug treatment program, we also have to make sure that there's ongoing supports and that there's sober living houses and so on. You can't take someone out of a drug treatment program, get them clean, and then throw them in a shelter with a bunch of people that are still addicted and using drugs. Yeah. So there's a lot to it for sure.
Yeah. If you don't start with the scourge of addiction, then we're missing the boat. In the most recent budget here, the Liberals did put forward, I think it was $50 million to talk about hiring 5 RNC officers, Happy Valley Goose Bay, 10 more for the Northeast Avalon. The year prior, they had money for 10 additional RNC officers with the expanded geographical footprint and responsibility of the RNC. The Liberals have talked about hiring 90 new police officers, 90 new RNC recruits by 2030, I'm pretty sure the number is. They've increased the bursary to 20,000 from 15 to try to incentivize people to join the force. The PCs have promised or pledged 46 additional law enforcement officers. I think it was 25 with the Mounties and 21 with the Constabulary. So, yeah, that's all fine. But that's got to come with more Crown prosecutors. It also has to come with, and I believe the starting point is absolutely in addictions treatment. And that's not just, the Department of Justice. That's the Department of Health Care and Community Services. It's part of the infrastructure development. It's part of housing. It's a part of education. So we do a poor job, when we silo all these things off, because addictions is not just a healthcare issue. It's broader than that. It's justice, it's education, it's housing, it's healthcare. So I think if you don't start there, then you're just, making announcements for the sake of. Paul, anything else this morning before we run out of time?
No, Paddy. That was basically my message for this morning, and you're right. It is a big issue. It does involve numerous departments of government and so on working together instead of working in silos. And I just think that somebody really needs to sit down to the table and put all these things together and look at ways that we can prevent crime. Because let's face it, a lot of the crime that is happening, especially when you hear about people saying, my car was broken into, my shed was broken into, my house was broken into. A lot of these things, not saying all, but I would say a large proportion of them are somehow connecting back to drugs and connecting back to addictions. So we need to do a better job in dealing with people that are having these problems and to try to deal with that. But at the same time, people also have to be able to live in safety in their communities, and that's going to require boots on the ground in terms of RNC, RCMP, and I certainly would support that as well.
Appreciate the time, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Paddy, and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Just very quickly, and as brought forward by a listener regarding the beluga conversation, which is interesting stuff. You know what it costs to care for the belugas at Marineland? $2 million a month. Wow, big price tag. Let's take a break. Betty, you stay right there to talk healthcare, and then whatever else you want to talk about, you can do it after this. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 4. Good morning, Betty. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you today, Patty?
Very well. How about you?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that me and my husband did listen to you every morning for many years. He actually even phoned in a few times. But I want to talk about the health care.
Okay.
Last July, he ended up with what he thought was a sore throat, went to the doctor, he knew something was wrong. And it took from July to December to get a scope put down. And we done that on December 11th, and it was told right away that it was esophageal cancer. Then it took from then to January to get into the cancer clinic, where he had a PET scan done. That was close to Christmas. When we got the results back we went in December, and in January, when they got the results back, we never ever met with a team of doctors. We met with them individually, a surgeon and one for chemo, one for radiation, and they all told us the same story, that it was contained to his lower esophagus. So they were going to go in with all this 28 radiation, 6 chemos, shrink it, and then have the surgery. And that would be a pull-up. And we were very lucky that it wasn't in the top part of his esophagus, because if it was up there, there'd be no surgery. So we started the treatments in February, and the end of his 4th week, we used to see one doctor, the chemo doctor on Friday and the radiation doctor on Monday. The surgeon we never seen no more till later. And at the end of the 4 weeks, we asked, or Keith asked, how big was the tumor when we started treatment. And the doctor actually looked at it and said, how am I supposed to tell you that? Do you know how many patients I see in the run of a day? Monday, when we had our appointment with the radiation doctor, we asked him, he said, I'll do better than that. I'll show you. So he took us into the office. He told us how big that one was. He also told us that there was 2 lymph nodes with cancer underneath, and also the top part of his esophagus. So we had 3 doctors individually that lied to us. I believe Keith would never have had treatments if he would have been informed properly. But he was in for a penny, he's in for a pound now. He decided to finish them. So we went through the treatments like a trooper. He actually drove in and drove out. I went with him, but he did do all the driving. And after the treatments, now there's more stories in between, but you haven't got long enough to listen to it all. But after the treatments, we were supposed that 5 weeks later have a PET scan, but we were informed that the PET scan was booked up, so we would have to settle for a CAT scan. So I didn't like that too much, but it was what it was. And he ended up getting very sick. having to go to hospital in our area at the time. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention the hospital, so...
Sure you are. Go ahead.
And, yeah, it was Carbonear Hospital.
Okay.
And we had to get down there twice, 12 to 15 hours each time. And it was brutal. And he had pneumonia, wasn't getting cleared up. Then he was on 2 different medications. One he had a reaction on, couldn't get out to the cancer clinic to send out another prescription. He wasn't well enough to go to Carbonear, so I had to take him down to O'Perlican, which I got to say, the best hospital you could go to. Compassion, good care, in and out, everything was fine. So we'll fast forward then to, we were supposed to go in to see the surgeon 5 to 6 weeks later, but that ended up being 2 months because of his pneumonia. So finally we get in, and he puts the light down to see if the tumour had shrunk in it. And we're only after having a CAT scan by now. And he informed us that day, which was no surprise to myself and Keith, that there was a growth in his upper esophagus. I never said nothing because I let Keith make all the decisions at this point. And anyway, we left. We had to come home. He wait for the biopsy to come back, and he was going to send Keith in for an emergency PET scan, which we went into. And a couple of weeks later, he called out. He was on speakerphone with myself and Keith. And he said it was indeed cancer in his top part of his esophagus. He never had all the PET scan back, but what he did have back was 2 lymph nodes underneath his esophagus at it. His bottom still at it, his top part of his esophagus still at it, and maybe his lungs. So it was then I spoke up and said, Al, we already knew about the top part. We already knew about the 2 lymph nodes. He asked me, how did I know that? I said, because 5 weeks into his treatments, we were told by one of his other doctors. He said, that's impossible. I only got the results back today. And he got on his computer. He said, I'm looking at it now. And he said, it was only cancer in the lower esophagus. So I said, you're telling me this doctor can predict the future. Because not only did he tell us, he showed us. And so from there, when they got the results back, we went into the doctor that originally told us. They didn't know what he told us at the beginning, obviously. And he told us, basically, Keith now was full of it. There was not many pieces of his body that didn't have cancer. And that he had 3 months to a year to live. First he said 3 months, then he looked at Keith, maybe a year. And that's when I spoke up and told him what I just told you. And he said, I can't remember telling you that. But when I go out now to set you up with palliative care, the palliative care program, I will go through my notes. When this doctor came back into the office, he sat down with tears in his eyes. He looked at Keith and he looked at me. He said, I am so sorry for how this system has treated you. And I let him know that there was nothing he needed to do. He was after killing this man. He's destroyed my life. And make sure your next patients basically are treated much better, and as a team that you got to get together.
I'm really sorry to hear this, Betty. Look, we lived it as a family. I know exactly where you're coming from. And of course, with human beings being responsible for diagnosis and prognosis and treatment, bad things are going to happen. But when they hit home, it is devastating. So I know exactly where you're coming from.
Well, you don't know how bad healthcare is till you're in it. But then, to fast forward, now we're into the palliative care program.
Okay.
So a nurse comes to the house, meets us. Now, keep in mind, this man is full of cancer. I got to have a doctor from St. John's. We only talk to her virtually. And the last couple of times she phoned, he couldn't even talk because by this time he's childlike. I think now he's after going to his brain. And so this nurse should have came in if this nurse was trained properly. Now, to the nurse's defense, this was a young nurse, and the nurse we were supposed to have was on holidays, and he was filling in. However, what should have been done, he should have came in and said, okay, this is a list of things you're going to need, so I'm going to send occupational therapy here to get everything in place for when you need it. Here is a list of all the palliative care medications you're going to need. Phone your family doctor immediately and get them all prescribed and get them in your house for when you're going to need them. This was not done. So I automatically assumed when it came time for these things that I would need, I would get them. Well, on the 20th of July, he got out of bed and things changed drastically. He could no longer swallow.
Yeah, this is all very sad. Is there anything in summary that you'd like to add, Betty? Because I'm really late. I have to get going, unfortunately.
Well, to be honest with you, at the end of the day, people got to know about these things. And also, I had to stay awake 30 hours putting THC in this man's mouth to keep him out of hospital. I ended up with palliative care. I couldn't get a turning pad. 2 days before he died, they got me a couple of wipes, a couple of boxes of gloves, 2 things of Attends, and that was it.
Not good enough.
I had to stay awake for 30 hours putting THC in this man because none of this was in place. And my doctor, his doctor said, I didn't think he was that bad. Now, I don't know how bad you got to be when you're full of cancer.
No,
But at the end of the day, the THC worked, and I did keep an eye, and this is where he died, in his home. But, I mean, the system is so flawed. It is so flawed. And like Tony Wakem says, and I'll quote him, we have to put the care back in health care because the treatment that he got was brutal. It was brutal. I don't sleep.
Betty, I'm really sorry to hear this.
Make sure this is all in place.
Right.
If and when you decide to keep your loved one at home. And another thing people should remember, don't rely on apps. Do not trust your doctors. Most of them are only in it for the money. And make sure your family doctor sends out all any scan, whether it's an MRI, a PET scan, X-ray. Get them emailed out so you can read them yourself.
Betty, I'm really sorry to hear of your struggles. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's go to the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Stu, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Couldn't be better. How about you?
Not too bad. You had a great summer, I trust?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks. How about you?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. I like to see it stay like this. Beautiful here now in Port aux Basques, bit of cloud. I love to see it stay like until April and then just warm up.
But alas, it won't.
That's for sure. You can bet on that one. Patty, I understand you might be a moderator or will be a moderator at the debate. Is it tonight?
I'm not involved.
Oh, okay. Because I would like to see, and something that you mentioned was just right what I like hearing is that you talked about that we need to have better royalties from those resources. Super royalties, I think, was a couple of things that you mentioned there. And because I've done a lot of research over it, and I've been keeping an eye on this since 97. That was first oil from Hibernia, I guess you're aware of. And I would say by today's calculation, or close as I can come to it, we've let over $300 billion go to offshore companies that came here to pump the oil out. And I believe, I could be wrong, maybe you can correct me, that we're still only getting $8 on a barrel of oil, which is absolutely absurd. And of course, I asked Andrew Parsons, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, what are you guys doing? Well, we're still working on it. That's the old adage. But I think we should be, asking these candidates, well, if you want my vote, then I need something from you, and I need it in writing, that you're going to work at getting a better or demanding a bigger royalty than what we're currently getting, so we can get ourselves out of the hole at least. And as you know too, Patty, like to Paul's conversation here about how much the crime has increased due to drugs and so on and so forth. That too is a result of poverty, to probably a great degree, and you know, like I said, we need to put these politicians' feet to the fire and say, look, we got to do better, because we are we're just getting deeper and deeper in the debt, not out of. I think we're writing a book. I'm going to call it How Newfoundland Struck It Broke, because that seems that's where we are. We're great at giving away the resources for very little, and not getting much in return. And you know, can you imagine, Patty, if we had $300 billion since '97? You wouldn't care about Muskrat Falls. You wouldn't really care about Churchill. You know, let it follow its course. But that's all I wanted to say, Patty.
Yeah.
You got to do better. Yeah.
Royalties are interesting. So the generic royalty regime applied at Hebron, and of course you factor in our equity stake and all that kind of stuff. But we sell our oil based on the price of Brent crude. But some of the royalty regime measures are attached to the West Texas Intermediate, which I've never really fully understood. That's where a so-called super royalty kicks in based on the price of a barrel of West Texas Intermediate, which is not how we price our oil. So I've never really understood how the relationship between Brent crude and WTI leads to some sort of examination of royalties, but it's a strange one. You know, the reason I mentioned royalty and super royalties, and super royalty is basically just, you know, an additional percentage when a price of barrel oil exceeds whatever number was brokered, whether it be $50 with Hebron or $65, whatever the case may be. But we insist on taking an equity stake, which I've never really fully understood, to be honest with you. You know, like even with Hebron, we put, what was it, $150 million cash on the barrelhead, and even at that point, we didn't still enter into the kind of agreement that we thought we were getting. They basically told us to piss off, and they paid us some money back by not doing accommodating some research and development. They gave us some money back for not doing the amount of construction here on shore. So it seems to be a little bit flimsier than it should be. Stu, final thoughts to you.
Yeah, because it sure sounds like another Churchill Falls deal and Muskrat deal and all this stuff. Yeah, it seems like they want to keep us muzzled, I guess. You know, again, the people that were negotiating with these companies, you know, screwed us again. And I think, Patty, I'm sure you agree, we need to keep this front and center, especially during this election, which is almost there now. Well, we can certainly keep it going, is demand a greater resource. And if we have to, let's hire some of these companies that are probably sitting idle. Come in and pump the oil out, and we'll pay you for your work, just like when you take your car to a mechanic or get somebody to paint your house. That's all we got to do, Patty.
Appreciate the time, Stu. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great one, my friend.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, the CEO and president of Newfoundland Labrador Hydro is Jennifer Williams. She's in the queue. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the president and CEO of Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro. That's Jennifer Williams. And good morning, Miss Williams. You're on the air.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, and I'm sure you will. Please call me Jennifer.
Jennifer, thank you very much. I really don't even know where to begin anymore with the complexities of this issue, but I would like to start with between now and 2041. One of the comments that I've heard repeatedly, and it goes something like this. It must be noted that under both models, the present value average annual payment from Hydro-Quebec to CFLCO is $663 million. That's due to shareholding HQ, Hydro-Quebec, recovers 35%. So the assertion here is it's not on an average of $1 billion a year. It's $430 million a year in today's dollars.
So I'll just open up by first to saying I understand your position. You said you're not quite sure where to begin, and I just want to let you know that I'm happy to stay as long as you'll have me today and answer as many questions as possible. Because it's important for us to get accurate information out there. And I believe in your preamble this morning, you noted to the listeners that I have to be careful in how I speak today, because I have to operate under, and all agencies, boards and commissions have to operate under the caretaker mode. So you might hear some slight hesitation as I formulate my responses today. So I want to be really clear that that's what I'm operating under.
Understood.
Yeah, so going back to your question, and I know it's a very specific question about, I guess, getting at our contention that we're getting on average $1 billion a year between now and 2041, and that is an accurate contention. And as the listeners will know, we have been publishing information, right from the beginning of the announcement, right up until we were allowed to publish information before the election started, that would detail in different manners the facts. And the facts around this are that we will get hundreds of millions of dollars in year one, up to nearly $2 billion in year 17, and it continues to grow after that. I do think that there is some confusion amongst some when they read materials that they take payments from Hydro-Quebec to CFLCO as that's what the payment to Treasury is, and it's not. You have to go through operating costs, and you have to then, each organization has to take its dividends, et cetera. So I think that there is some confusion amongst some in their interpretation of materials that this is not the case. But we have published that it is hundreds of millions of dollars in year one, almost $2 billion in year 17. On average, it's $1 billion a year. All this information has been made available on the Our Chapter website in very early days. And I just want to add one quick thing, too, is that we get a lot of very specific questions, and then we get people who say it's very confusing. So we are trying to be responsive to the various different audiences across the province. Some people want a ton of detail, and some people want very little detail. They want to know, what does this mean for me in a high-level fashion? So the materials that we have been creating reflect all of those different audiences, and so sometimes people will see information represented in high-level fashion, and sometimes they'll see it represented in very detailed fashion.
So, in layman's terms, then, once again, if the equity stake, would use the round number, 65%, 35%, if indeed that is the breakdown, how do we arrive at $1 billion? Is this $1 billion that stands outside the current contractual arrangement, outside the current equity breakdown? Because if someone breaks it down for me and says, given the equity stakes, that billion is more like 430 million. So is the billion on average outside of the current contract, or how did we arrive at that number?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but basically there's a publication to go back to the Treasury, because we're talking about the Treasury. Again, some folks will confuse payments to HQ, and then they will forget, for example, or so payments that HQ makes to CFLCO, but they will forget that Newfoundland Labrador Hydro also has to pay CFLCO. They will forget that the provincial treasury gets money from water rentals and royalties. So what we did to make it very clear is on the ourchapter.ca website, there is a slide or a chart that shows the financial benefit to the Newfoundland Labrador Treasury, and it lays out very clearly what the actual direct dividends are to the province. And I think it's important that people would want to consult that page to get the exact number, because, again, I think that there's confusion around people saying that, well, Hydro-Quebec is only paying this amount, and then you got to take out operating costs, and they take their share, and that is all of those things are true, but we have to look at what the actual dividends are to the province when we are talking about, on average, $1 billion a year.
Then it's reference to escalator clause. So inside the MOU, I read it as the pathway to 5.9 cents. And then I've heard other analysis say that that's more like, in present day dollars, 2.7 cents. I'm not entirely sure how that number is arrived at, but the path to 5.9 cents, can you elaborate on how that works?
Right. So the path to 5.9 cents, and sort of picking up on what I said at the beginning, is we have been working to make as much of this information as possible as accessible to as many people as possible. And we evaluate people's understanding, and when we feel that's not helping people understand much, we continue to add to the conversation and add materials. So the 5.9 cents was a very early way for us to communicate what the average price would be over the duration of the contract in comparison to what we are receiving today. And so the 5.9 cents is reflective of if you were to express the average price in today's dollars, or in 2024 dollars, looking out over the duration of the contract, and you take the value that Hydro-Quebec we had negotiated on a forecast basis to pay for what they were taking. It's probably getting confusing here because again, this is more detailed math and evaluation. But so that is what that is made to represent, and it was a number that we used at the beginning to try to help people understand the difference in the existing contract and what we are forecast to receive in the new MOU once we get it to definitive agreements. So basically, as you take what Hydro-Quebec would be receiving in volumes, and if you look closely at the MOU, you can see their volumes from Churchill Falls decline materially over time. And then you would take the payments that they make and you do some back calculation and you get the 5.9 cents expressed in 2024 dollars is the average price to be obtained. On a forecast basis.
Understood. Another key issue that people lean in on heavily is comments coming from Michael Sabia and other leadership executives at Hydro-Quebec about replacement costs. Had they not been able to achieve the current arrangement inside this MOU, is that the next viable option for them to replace this would be in between 13 and 16 cents, which is far greater number than what we're talking about, even on a scale towards 5.9. So the basic question is, why would we charge them so little if their next best option was 13 to 16 cents per kilowatt hour?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yep. So this, I think, takes, the answer to this one takes a couple of angles. So I'll start with the fact that the formula that we have, the formula we're currently negotiating, but the principles that we are honoring in the MOU and that the definitive agreements will have to honor is that replacement cost is going to be one of the price indicators in the formula. So to suggest that we have not received value for, I'll call it what would be a replacement product is not true. And that is very, very clearly laid out in the MOU that the replacement cost has to be a factor. So I want to be really clear about that. That is, when folks assert that that's not there, read the MOU. It's incredibly and abundantly clear. But the other piece, and this is where we're going to get a little more technical on a math basis, but hopefully it'll speak to some folks, is that taking that value that Hydro-Quebec and we have negotiated they will pay for the volumes they're going to take, it is the $33.8 billion on a forecast basis. It will move with markets. If markets go beyond our forecast, so will the price. But using that number, the $33.8 billion, that equates to, if we take it today, 5.9 cents, as we've just discussed, expressed in 2024 dollars. If instead we were to take that value and start taking it in 2041, which is when Hydro-Quebec would have to deal with a replacement project. They wouldn't be doing a replacement project today. They have 17 years of free power. So they would not be doing a replacement project until 2041. So they would not pay a replacement cost today. So if you start paying in 2041 instead, that actually equates to over 13 cents a kilowatt hour. So we essentially got a material portion of what that replacement cost is. And so the choice is that you take it now or you start taking it in 2041. But if you did take it in 2041, because there's definitely some folks out there, let's wait and get replacement costs in 2041. And the math shows we got that already. But it makes sense for us as a province to break the contract now, to start having it much more fair and much more balanced, to bring all that revenue into the province, to be treated much more fairly now, get access to power, so we can have economic development, build all those other projects. It just makes much more sense for us to do this today as opposed to waiting. We essentially got the replacement value.
To that end, to pick up on, industrial expansion or commercial expansion, mining or otherwise, people do indeed say, well, one of the upsides in Lab West is quadrupling of the Labrador recall block to about 1,200 megawatts. But that doesn't happen until over the course of decades. I think it finally gets to that 1,200 in about 35 years from now. So that bolsters that argument that some people make about why not just wait and get the replacement costs today, as opposed to thinking that 35 years down the line we finally get 1,200 megawatts.
Yeah, so I think that, again, there's some confusion about when we get access to power and why we get excess power in the timeframes that we've asked for. So I do hear some accusations, well, we don't even get access to power until 2030. And my answer is yes. And that's what we asked for. And I think not asked for, but that's what we negotiated. Why would we accept hundreds of megawatts today? Let's say we said, okay, no, we respond and say, no, we demand we get access to 500 megawatts today. The customer doesn't exist. right? So, for example, the mining companies in IOC cannot accept 500 megawatts of power today. So what we would do is we would demand access to power today, and then it would sit there like a road to nowhere. Those customers have to build out their facilities to accept those megawatts. The power sits at Churchill Falls. It's got to make its way over to Lab West. The transmission lines over to Lab West are already full, so we got to build new transmission. So the timing of the megawatts that would come to us in the 2030s to Lab West matches when we could actually use it. And the reason why it matches that is because we've been in conversations with all kinds of various industrial customers that could potentially use power in Labrador. And those customers are telling us when they can be ready, and then we know when we can be ready from a transmission perspective. So we've timed that. And then if you, again, look closely, so that's sort of that piece I think is really, really important for folks to not assume that us getting the power in 5 years' time is a bad thing. That's exactly what makes sense from a utility and a customer perspective. The other piece is that there's 1,000 megawatts coming to our jurisdiction in the next 10 years. And if you think about the 2040s, Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro would have to, in addition to Hydro-Quebec, to negotiate what their megawatts they would want in the 2040s. Let's say we punted this out 10 or 15 years. Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro also has to negotiate with CFLCO to get access to power. So it's the exact same thing. So our ability to say yes to customers, we know exactly what power we have access to. We can start having those conversations today. We can say yes to customers today, versus if we don't, we can't say yes to any of these customers. We cannot say yes to, even people talk about AI. We could put AI in Labrador, but we can't do that today because we also have to negotiate and get power out of that plant when the time comes.
It's our first opportunity to put you on hold, Jennifer. We'll come right back and start with Gull.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there we go. Jennifer Williams on hold. Let's take a break. Welcome back to the show. Let's rejoin Jennifer Williams on one. Jennifer, you're back on the air.
Great, thank you.
Before we get into Gull, let's talk about the influence of inflation on present value. One of the claims made is that adjusting for inflation actually lowers the value of future payments. You take slight with that. So how is that not the case?
No, it does. Inflation does affect the value, but it was factored into the calculations that we put forward.
How so?
And I think that's the issue. The discount rate, so again, we're getting probably a bit specific here, but this is all, again, if anybody wants to do more reading beyond what I'm going to say here now, I invite them to read on the Newfoundland Labrador Hydro website our response to a group of local folks from last week, where we take on a number of these assertions that the numbers that we're putting forward are incorrect. And this group that put the letter forward quoted Mr. Wilson, basically saying that, well, of course, Mr. Wilson is correct, and that both us and a private citizen, Mr. Luke O'Brien, in conjunction with J.P. Morgan, and Mr. Luke O'Brien produced analysis that showed that Mr. Wilson's analysis is not correct. And Mr. Wilson asserted that you have to use the discount rate and also then added on the effects of inflation. But that was incorrect because the discount rate includes the effects of inflation. So it was incorrect to have done this, and we just laid that out very, very clearly. So to your question is, why don't we include the effects of inflation? And the answer is we do. And all of our numbers absolutely include the effects of inflation.
Then we talk about control afforded to Hydro-Quebec on the Churchill River, whether it be at the upper and or Gull. So one thing is, I hear people tell me that we've given away in full water rights. How does water rights work in this current negotiation regarding the MOU?
Mm-hmm. So I probably would contrast it to today and then what is planned and in the MOU to be reflected in final definitive agreements. So right now, under the existing contract, Hydro-Quebec, as has been demonstrated through our actions at the Supreme Court, have the ability to dictate exactly how the current plant operates. Well, and there's above a certain level, there is some other flexibility, but for the materiality of the plant, they choose how the water moves along that river because they're the plant that's the furthest upriver. So they say, we're going to turn on 5 generators now at this output that has a certain water flow in the river, and then the plants downstream, Muskrat Falls, they receive that water. Quebec chooses the dispatch of the water on that river. And that is not what you would see around the world on other rivers where there's multiple different plants and multiple different owners of plants. And so what we are contemplating now and in the MOU is that instead of that continuing to be the case, we're going to have a different water management agreement that reflects all of the plants on the river, and that we will dispatch what makes the most sense for all of the owners along the river. And so that is really what's contemplated. So as opposed to Hydro-Quebec retaining control for another 17 years and to be determined in the future, we will take back, put in normal routine water control that you'd see on any other river, and that's what will be implemented in the definitive agreements.
But wouldn't it ultimately still be one entity making those decisions regarding dispersion of water or water rights control? And who would that be? Would it still be Hydro-Quebec?
No, that's not at all the case. Basically, is you have I'll call it a river controller, is essentially what you would have. And all of the people all of the entities along that river would have a say into the independent river controller on what needs to be dispatched. Basically, everyone's contract entitlements have to be honored. Muskrat Falls, Gull Island, Churchill Falls would have to be honored, but there would be an independent coordinator that would ensure that the units are all dispatched according to everyone gets their minimum. And the positive here, and I will just actually take a little aside, is somebody should go look up the Columbia River and look at how many facilities are on that river, and it's the same kind of a concept. There is no single entity when you have this modern water management agreement that we're going to have that dictates how the water moves. Everyone's entitlements have to be honored, but they can be delivered in the most economic and most efficient manner possible. One of my colleagues obviously uses this example. Let's say that there's a unit that needs to be taken out of service in one plant, or that the load on the system is such that you could have one unit operating one plant inefficiently, because each unit has a sort of an optimum place that it operates. Let's say it's at 150 megawatts instead of 200 megawatts. You want to be at 150 all the time, because that's where you get the most energy out of a drop of water. And that is exactly what we're going to do go forward. So you'll share around the entitlements to everybody in a modern, efficient water management agreement, as opposed to one party saying, I want this unit on at this point, no matter what. We're going to modernize this.
Then let's move on to Gull Island. So the concern in some corners is that we give full control and decision-making authority to Hydro-Quebec regarding development at Gull Island, a 40% interest in equity stake in perpetuity, and we have little to no say there, with only access to some 225 megawatts, albeit they assume risk and liability. So that's the basic question, is why is Hydro-Quebec rule the roost at Gull?
So Gull Island, let's be clear, sits undeveloped. We have had numerous goes at trying to get this plant developed, and it still sits undeveloped. I'll just make this one point. I find this interesting because obviously we pay a lot of attention to various inputs or perspectives. Obviously, we can't respond to all the various inputs and perspectives individually necessarily, but somebody just pointed this out to me recently, that there was a local person who's a guest writer on Uncle Gnarly, and they had talked about Gull Island. This is a several-year-old blog post, and they had suggested, I think it was in 2021, this blog post, it was talking about the value of Churchill and the value of Gull Island. And it said, this is literally what it says, clearly the economics of Gull Island look like a dismal failure and the project should never be sanctioned. And it basically says you need 17 cents a kilowatt hour to make that plant viable. There's a lot of different perspectives on Gull Island and its viability. Hydro and Hydro-Quebec both believe that this is a great project that benefits Hydro-Quebec, and it absolutely benefits our province. So, we are working together to get that project moving. It brings so much benefit to all, as we've talked about, there will be thousands of jobs that get unlocked with this. This plant sits undeveloped. So when you factor in the benefit of getting this project going, us providing benefit to the region with regards to increased electricity, it is lowest cost, but it's not a low-cost project, right? As I said just then, that there's a lot of costs associated with this. So in order for this to proceed, it has to make sense to both us and Quebec. For it to make sense for Quebec, they obviously they want to, and I think it's appropriate, and we obviously agree with this, for them to have a significant role in the project management of the construction of this. I am surprised that people are offended by Hydro-Quebec, who has built almost 40,000 megawatts of hydroelectricity, that they would have the primary role in the decision-making around this plant when this jurisdiction has, the most recent one has Muskrat Falls under its belt. So it does surprise me at times to hear that people are upset that Hydro-Quebec would be the primary project manager for Gull Island. So I can't quite square that when we know that they're very good at this. And the other part that I can't quite square is when folks are upset that they would have a minority shareholding. So we are the majority shareholder for a plant that sits undeveloped, and that they are paying for our equity. They are paying for our majority shareholding of this plant and for the profit that we're going to have throughout the decades. So I can't quite square why folks are upset about that when the alternative is that it sits undeveloped. So it doesn't quite make sense to me, this assertion.
It's time for one more break to put you on hold, if that's okay, Jennifer. I'll get a newscast and we'll come back.
I'll stay as long as I can.
Terrific.
As long as you want me to.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Jennifer Williams on hold. Time for the news. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back. Let's go back to Jennifer Williams on one. Jennifer, you're back on the air.
Thank you.
So in terms of Gull, you mentioned the jobs during the construction phase and the access to a couple of hundred megawatts. Is that the extent of the benefit to this province?
Oh, gosh, no. Gull Island, I mean, if you think about, a big part of the conversation that we are having now is that we have this gem of a facility in Labrador at Churchill Falls, and it should be providing significant benefit to us. And it is about to do that, right? We have secured something that is about to start doing that. With regards to Gull Island, it can turn into that as well. It is a different product today because we've got to build it first and get it paid off and all those sorts of things. It sits undeveloped. But what we will have, and this is where I really do ask that we have the vision here. I'm trying to be careful about not being too political, but we have the opportunity to take an undeveloped asset, to develop it, and then we will have two of these gem facilities that is in place for decades to come. It is a really, really important component about what is possible here. So that is just something that I want to mention. So, but in addition to, even so, we'll have a future gem that is just as valuable as CF. We're going to have two of those. In the interim period, there is actual profit coming back to the province as well, for however the province would choose to use that. And that is, I think, a bit of a misconception or a misunderstanding as well, that there's, quote-unquote, no profit associated with Gull Island, and that is not true. It is simply not true. I ask people to go back to the financial benefit to Newfoundland and Labrador Treasury document that we uploaded in early January that shows the benefit there. And you can see there that for the new developments, there is, on a nominal basis, there's $43 billion in dividends from those new developments. And then there's also water rentals and royalties. Right now, government doesn't get anything from the plant that does not exist at Gull Island. There'll be water rentals and royalties that goes direct to Treasury. There's all the jobs that are associated with it, and as we said, we unlock all of the power access. We have access to power in the future. There's something that doesn't get talked about hardly at all. Is there will come open blocks of power in the future that we can gain access to, and we can choose to use those blocks of power in the future as a result of this whole deal that will allow us to choose to use it at the time, or we could sell it back to Hydro-Quebec, and we don't even have to figure out exactly how we're going to price that at this point. So whatever the situation is happening in several decades, we can harness that. The price is going to increase there. All of the costs of operating Gull Island are going to be covered and paid for by the people who are the off-takers, who are primarily the off-takers in Quebec. The ratepayers in Quebec are going to pay for a plant that gets built in our jurisdiction, that gets materially built by our people, that we didn't pay for. And I mean, I think those are significant benefits that we're not talking about enough.
Insofar as the expansion at the upper, Gull, and 2 transmission projects associated with either or, how much borrowing do we have to do, and what level of risk associated, whether it be at the upper Churchill expansion or both transmission lines, transmission projects?
Yeah, so I think that there might be some confusion in the public that folks are nervous about what the financial burden is on our province because they think about Muskrat Falls. These 2 projects are built for very different purposes, and I'll use Gull Island first as probably the primary question I think that folks have around this. Is that how is that going to get paid for? And the reason why, I expect the reason why certainly some in the public would be nervous about what does this mean for us, is that Muskrat Falls was a project built for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador to be used in Newfoundland and Labrador. And yes, there's a component that goes to Nova Scotia, but primarily it's being used here. And so therefore, the ratepayers here had to essentially pay for that asset. And we find ourselves in a place where obviously it was a government choice that we're going to mitigate against those rates. I'm trying to be really careful here not to go too far, but these are facts, right? We were in a rate mitigation world that we're mitigating against those rates because the rates would have been high otherwise. But the difference then with Gull Island, and so therefore the taxpayer has to jump in on that. So that's why that burden is there. In Gull Island's scenario, the majority of it is going to be utilized and paid for by the customers in Quebec. It is not being paid for by the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. And so I think that's a really big difference that I think that there's some confusion around. We can, if we choose to, if it makes sense for us as a province, we can take some of the power back from Gull Island, and we will pay Gull Island for whatever that power is, but we don't have to. But the difference is that Quebec has to pay for the full shot. That's the difference. We don't pay for it.
How much borrowing are we set to do if this all proceeds as understood in the MOU?
So that question can be interpreted a couple of different ways because you're talking about who's doing the borrowing, right? So you've got Gull Island Joint Venture, you've got CFLCO, and then so that would be, I think, all related to all these different pieces. So, but basically each of the entities will do their borrowing as opposed to, I think the question is, what is the government going to borrow? Each of the individual entities will do their borrowing.
Okay. So, one of the concerns people, and this is not specifically for you about concerns with the oversight panel, that they're really just handcuffed to what's in the MOU as opposed to consideration of other things that could happen into the future. So how should we consider, we know Hydro-Quebec and the province of Quebec are lobbying the federal government for money regarding transmission lines to be built. We also know that the unicorn that is the East-West Energy Corridor, a conversation as old as Diefenbaker, might happen. The Prime Minister has talked about it, and that would change a lot of things insofar as benefits to either side, I'll call them. So is that being considered inside the negotiation? For out clauses, say, for instance, if all of a sudden east-west flow of energy is a thing, all of a sudden that changes a whole lot of these considerations, doesn't it?
As it relates to, I'll call it the specificity of, like you said, something that's been contemplated for decades, we are, as experts in this field, and including the experts that we have employed who do this for a living, we factor in all of the both current scenarios as well as any future scenarios, and we factor that into the components of the MOU. So, you have to consider what are the things that mean the most to us as a jurisdiction and include that in the MOU. I mentioned there a few minutes ago that we can choose to use power that will come to us over the decades. How we're going to use that? Yes, it's in province. We still have a booking through Quebec on the transmission system there. How we exactly utilize that in the long term, that is a factor that is being considered in our current moment. So, we are very live to all of those potential situations nationally in this moment, and that is absolutely being considered. I think that while there's some parties that would be much more open and clear and public with what their asks are nationally, and again, I can't speak for government, and I really can't. I think that, just caution folks that just because you hear one party saying one thing doesn't mean there's not other conversations happening. I need to stop there because I need to be really careful.
And I'm attempting to just put forth some questions that have been put to me. Of course, I'm not in the room. I have no idea. But, people will ask questions about rates being currently paid. In Quebec, on an annualized average, in and around 8 cents per kilowatt hour. Here, for residential customers, in and around 14.25 cents per kilowatt hour. What could any of these potential developments mean for our rates? Or is that more a government consideration of funneling the money to further rate mitigation or what have you?
So I like how you ended your question there, because I think that's exactly it. It's a question for a future government. We know what we have a rate mitigation. Again, this is a fact. This is not an opinion or it's political, but there is a rate mitigation plan in place up to 2030. So that is in place. It's an existing commitment. Beyond that, that is a question for a future government. Will a future government want to do anything over and above that immediately? Again, that's a question for a future government. But I would like to just very briefly talk about the rates in Quebec versus the rates in our province. And CFLCO 100% has an important role to play in the total cost of system delivery in Quebec. I am not going to downplay that at all. But it's really, really important that folks understand that on your electricity bill, and on the bills in Quebec as well, there are three big components that make up what the rate is at the meter that you pay. One is the generation cost, so that would be, say, like a CFLCO for the folks in Quebec, or if you think about here on the island, it's the rates that it costs us to run Bay d'Espoir. So there's the generation cost. Then there's the costs of running your transmission system, and then there's the costs of running your distribution system, so the poles and wires that you see just in your neighborhood. So if you think about what's going on in Quebec, 85% of their generation, so of those three components, 85% of it comes from their own system. 15% comes from CFLCO currently. But then you also have to add on the cost of transmission in their system and the cost of distribution in their system. So the effect of CFLCO has an effect, but it's not the only reason of what their rates are. So then you say, well, why are their rates so low? And I think I would suggest there's two reasons for that. One is they have 9 million people to split all their costs amongst. We have 500,000, and we have a huge geographic province where we supply electricity to every nook and cranny, as you know. So we have 500,000 people to split our cost amongst. Quebec has 9 million people to split their cost amongst. So obviously, that's going to make a unit cost lower. Plus, in the same way that CFLCO is a low-cost source, Hydro-Quebec has built a lot of plants themselves over time, and those are continuing to be low-cost sources. So the Churchill Falls contract, as is today, is not the only reason that Quebec has low rates. So I just wanted to take that on, because if there's an assertion that we should get the exact same thing because people think they're the exact same systems, but that's not accurate.
Last one, two-prong. Was there ever an independent evaluation of the value of Gull Island done? And secondly, to that, if there was or not, was there ever any discussion with another entity to be involved with to build Gull and to get the power out of Labrador? We'll just say Fortis or whoever, just for an example.
So I think we take on a little bit of that at times with regards to the value, and in response to the group of folks last week that we responded to publicly there. And we read that very clearly. So again, I invite your listeners to review that letter. It's fairly lengthy, but I hope it's helpful to the understanding and the conversation. We 100% assess the value of all of the assets that are being contemplated in this MOU. What we did not do is publish that information. And that makes no sense to publish that information, because if you do, you basically say, hey, listen, this is how we evaluate and value these assets. And so then you show Quebec, hey, listen, this is our value. So what are they going to do? They're going to use that against us. So, and the people that we used, obviously, for the inputs to that work were experts. These are the experts that work in electricity markets and execute multi-billion-dollar transactions for a living for decades. And the other piece, too, I think would be really helpful, and I don't know how hard it would be to find this, but I do invite any listener who's interested to try to find I guess it's either in Hansard or they could find it some way, just listen to the qualifications of the people that came and spoke at the House of Assembly, to every member that's elected on behalf of the province to speak to their exact qualifications. It is very impressive. And so when we hired these people, they don't immediately lose their independence when we say we're going to pay you. And I need to underline that. Just because you pay a consultant doesn't mean they now start telling you what you want to hear. So we hired the absolute best experts to help us with our asset evaluation, and they are independent, and they did not tell us what we wanted to hear. And it's really, really important that folks do not dismiss anybody. Like, lawyers are hired all the time. So is their advice, no longer valid because you pay them? We hire accounting firms. We hire engineering firms. To suggest that those folks are not independent, I cannot square that at all. That makes no sense to me. So we did asset evaluation absolutely as part of our analysis. It was a factor in our MOU discussions, and we cannot make it public.
I appreciate the time, Jennifer. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
I guess I just want to underline that just because somebody asserts something and it gets amplified doesn't mean it's correct. We are trying really hard, and we know we're never meeting the bar, but we continue to try to reach for that bar on having a broad range of information available to people. And I ask that people also know that it's a range of interests that we're trying to meet. So we have some people who only want the treetops information and what it means to them. We create materials for them. We are trying to also be responsive to people who want a lot of detail, and we're trying to be responsive to those. And so, we ask for, I guess, not folks' patience, but we ask for folks to acknowledge that there's going to be a lot of different materials, and we're trying really, really hard to meet the public's expectations on what information they need to consider this. But this is a generational opportunity for our province, and I'm got to be careful I don't go too political here, but as somebody who's materially involved in this, I really believe this is it's got all the right inputs, and it's a great opportunity for us right now.
Appreciate your time. Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, great. Take care.
Bye-bye. It's Jennifer Williams, CEO and President of Hydro. Let's take a break. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Jean, you're on the air.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm okay, thank you. How about you?
I'm okay. I'm a little bit, how do I say it? A little bit upset. I've been listening to all the promises that's been made lately, all the dollars that's going to be provided. And meantime, there's countless diabetics out there that can't get financial assistance with their medication and supplies. Like, why?
Good question. I mean, I don't know why we haven't signed on to the National Pharmacare Plan. As taxpayers, I'm already chipping in on the program, period. So why are people in this province not able to take advantage of it? I just don't understand.
Me either. And I have my daughter just recently found out that she's diabetic. She works minimum wage, part-time. And, she can't afford. She's spending money she doesn't have to stay alive, basically. And, when I hear her say, I really need this, but I can't do it right now because I need the money for my needles and my sensors and my the rest of the things I need, and that's heartbreaking. That is very heartbreaking. She needs help. There's millions of people that need help with diabetes, and it's not there in this province.
Yeah, I mean, I've been asking that question for quite a long time because we were really quick to sign on to the school lunch program. We were quick to sign on to the $10 a day program. But for some reason, we're dragging our feet on pharmacare. And we're not the only province. Even if someone just told me, well, here's why we're not. Okay, but currently, there's no reason offered as to why we're not. So consequently, people like your family and in other families and other listeners are thinking, why am I continuing to come out of pocket for diabetes medications and supplies? Why am I continuing to come out of pocket for contraceptives when the federal government has funded a program?
Exactly. For instance, the addicts will get free methadone, free needles. You know, everything's free. I have no problem. Those people need help too. But, you know, so does the diabetics. It's life-saving medication. And I don't know why they're not being helped.
I don't either. You make a good point. I mean, we've heard from different individuals in the province that are in the same boat, paying out of pocket for supplies and medications, and they're asking the exact same question, and it's a very, very good one.
Well, you know, I've sent emails to all the candidates. No reply. I even sent an email to Mark Carney's office. No reply. You know, but still, they're talking about, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And fine, I got no problem with helping anybody. But these diabetics, they need help too.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%.
Well, I'm hoping that somebody in the campaign is listening and they're going to open their eyes and realize that these are human beings that need life-saving medication. And, you know, a new housing unit is needed, but so is medication.
Agreed. Really appreciate your time this morning, Jean. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
The same to you. Bye-bye. All right, let's get to a break. When we come back, Juan is in the queue to talk about the process regarding special ballots, and then plenty of time for you. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Juan, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. How about you?
I am good. Patty, calling this morning, I guess, concerning the special ballot process. I feel I'm into a area that a lot of people could be into regarding the ballot. So for more context here, I applied for a special ballot on the 22nd of September, which was before the postal strike. I ended up being out of town, like a lot of Newfoundlanders, right on a moose hunting trip for a week. Didn't get any news, any updates of any kind. I was not aware that I wouldn't receive my ballot. Wasn't aware from, media telling us that, you could cancel your special ballot and getting another way. I went to the advance poll last evening, spent an hour there trying to actually get a vote that way, and I was told I already voted, which I haven't. I proceeded during that last evening to show to people that the status of my application showed that I did not receive that ballot, yet I was marked as voted. And I said, that to me is incorrect. I haven't voted. I've received nothing. I'm not going to receive anything. And, the whole reason, obviously, for applying for the special ballot was I was going to be out of province on election day. So that's kind of a background. I feel a lot of people, a lot of moose hunters out of town not getting updates. I wasn't aware there was a courier service or anything like that would deliver these. And, extremely frustrated about just doing basic right and trying to vote.
Yeah, I mean, I know the process was, once the postal strike kicked in, is if that you cancelled your special ballot, then you would be, reflected on the voters list as having not voted. So you weren't aware of that, and so consequently you showed up and had to argue your way to no avail.
Right. I argued, and the people at the polling stations done an excellent job, Patty. I was there for an hour. They made multiple phone calls, and everyone said, your Sean is voted. I said, but, I'm giving you a link that was sent to my email from Elections NL, shows my status, shows is not received, coming from, Elections NL itself, and yet that wasn't good enough, right? Until this morning, and the lady that called me, which was very helpful, she told me, you would have got an email to cancel this. Now, I'm in IT for a long time. I have no email from Elections NL. I have no email saying to cancel this process. So I didn't hear it through a media broadcast. It's not on my email, so I have no idea what she's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there was bound to be plenty of confusion when we're, relying on so many ballots to be mailed in, whether it be here in the city of St. John's, whether it be looking for a special ballot for the provincial election. When the postal strike hit, this was inevitable. And whether or not Elections NL did a good enough job to make sure everybody knew exactly what they had to do to ensure their right to vote. And I understand where you're coming from. I brought it up a couple of times, but that's not enough. I mean, Elections NL through every media outlet, every avenue possible, so that people get a chance to actually see what the expectations are.
Right. And at the end of the day, my reason for, coming on the line this morning and doing this is making people aware. Reach out to Elections NL if you haven't received that. They'll respond like they did to me this morning within a few hours, right, to rectify the situation. I think this election is really important. It's important on a number of factors, but, Jennifer talked earlier about hydro. I think it's the single biggest issue for the province, and everyone needs to vote.
No argument here. I take it seriously, my ability to cast a ballot. Absolutely.
Thank you, Patty.
I appreciate your time, Juan. So just in summary, now it's all been cleared up with Elections NL and you're going to get to vote?
They are couriering me my vote today.
Terrific. That's the good news. I appreciate your time. Sorry you had to go through it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, there was always going to be a snag when Canada Post went on strike, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that the strike continues, to be honest. Let's see here. Let's go to line number 1. Layla, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you today?
I'm very well. How about you?
Well, I'm doing as well as I can be with 3 of my friends currently kidnapped by the Israeli-occupied forces. But, I just wanted to call in and talk about that today, just to let people know what's happened. I don't know if people have seen, but early this morning at around 4:30 Gaza time or 11 p.m. our time, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition and 1,000 Madeleines were intercepted by the Israeli occupation forces. This was an illegal and an unlawful interception of over 90 volunteers bringing aid to a starving population that is going under a manufactured famine. And this blockade that is happening on Gaza is illegal. It is an illegal siege on Gaza that the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, 1,000 Madeleines, and Global Sumud were attempting to break so that they could bring in humanitarian aid and create a humanitarian corridor to encourage more organizations and more powers around the world to step in and bring much-needed baby formula, medical equipment, medication, food, nutrition that these people desperately need during this well-documented famine and genocide.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I'm really sorry to hear that your friends have been detained or abducted or whatever the right word is. It should have never come to this. The provision of humanitarian aid, food and otherwise, has been understood and approved by the entirety of the developed world. Everybody knows the rules of engagement. Everybody knows the definitions of weaponization of humanitarian aid and food is a war crime that the whole world has agreed on. So it should have never come to volunteers have to be part of a flotilla to provide said aid. So I wanted to get that out of the way. Secondly...
Yes, exactly. these volunteers, Sadie, Nikita, and Devaney, would not have had to have done this, would not have had to, put themselves in harm's way if our representatives, if our political parties had done anything just to step in and to act. It is because of their inaction that we now have 3 Newfoundlanders, 3 people from our community currently in harm's way, kidnapped. We do not know currently where they are. We do not know their status. We won't know that for a while. So it is incredibly stressful to their families, to their friends, to their loved ones, to their communities. And this would not have had to have happened. Regular, everyday Canadians would not have had to have stepped in and to do this if they didn't feel like they had no other choice because nobody else was acting.
I understand. So what do you suggest people do? Like, I've mentioned this off the top of the show, and I mentioned the girls or the women by name, and the suggestion is to go through your elected officials, specifically your members of parliament, to plead with them to act. So in addition to that, what do you think people should understand here? What do you think people should do?
I think first and foremost, people need to start, really tuning in, just checking in, educating themselves on.
Leila?
Yes?
Okay, no, you cut out there for a minute. Sorry, start again.
Oh, sorry. I think, first off, yes, we need to be contacting and calling our specifically Anita Anand from Foreign Affairs, David McGuinty from National Defense, Prime Minister Mark Carney, your local members of Parliament. Paul Connors is Devaney and Nikita's MP. Joanne Thompson is Sadie's MP. Joanne Thompson has refused to respond or to act or to acknowledge. For 2 years, several members of community have been reaching out to her, asking her to act, and she has refused to done anything and has stood by. And so contact them, pressure them to demand the safety and the release of our volunteers, and also to impose immediate sanctions on Israel, because Canada has an obligation based on the Geneva Convention to prevent genocide from happening. Instead, we are actually financing it. We're providing weapons through diplomatic cover and to impose a 2-way arms embargo. I don't know if you've just seen, but the City of St. John's has voted unanimously to pass a 2-way arms embargo, and that is a huge step, and that is something that should be inspiring everyone in every city and every town across this country to act. We also need to open up a humanitarian corridor to break the siege on Gaza. This is what the Freedom Flotilla was trying to do. They were trying to open up the ways to stop Israel from imposing this blockade and this siege so that other people could act, so that other governments, other organizations could act. This has been happening for 17 years. 17 years. This has been illegally imposed on Gaza. And also, call these people to provide immediate consular services to all of the Canadians that have been unlawfully detained by Israel. It is not just Sadie and Nikita and Devaney, who I love very much. It is also Miss Kwasson, it's Nima, and it's Haram. There are 3 other Canadians who have been kidnapped as well. And, what really worries me is that we have seen how they are treating, people with influence like Greta Thunberg. The violence and the aggression, the dehumanization, the psychological torture. They are getting their medications taken from them. They're having hijabs ripped off of Muslim women. And they're not being given food and water. And that is what it could possibly happen, what will likely happen to 3 people that I love so dearly. And not just to them, but to everyone that's on the flotilla. And what's happening is that this does not even reach the severity of what Palestinian prisoners go through. This is just what we have seen happen to Canadian citizens, American citizens. This is nothing compared to what Palestinian people are going through every single day. There are thousands of Palestinians that are illegally detained, not charged, that are prisoners that are being abused. They're being tortured sexually, psychologically, physically, being denied food, water, medication.
I understand your frustration and your anguish, Layla. Fingers crossed for some positive updated news regarding Devoni, Nikita and Sadie as soon as possible.
Yes. And just one last thing. If you have never done anything to act, I'm talking to every single person listening. Today, you have the ability to do something so that you can look back and say, I did something. I had done my part to stop this genocide. There is a rally today, 4:30 p.m. at City Hall. We are showing up to demand the safety of our community members. We are showing up to demand the sanctions on Israel, the two-way arms embargo, to open up a humanitarian corridor, to provide immediate consular services to our community. And please, show up, 4:30 p.m. at City Hall. You have the right to make your demands heard. You have the right to communicate with your elected representatives. It is unfortunate, and it is unfortunate and shameful that our politicians have not done anything so far.
I appreciate your time, Layla. I wish you good luck. Fingers crossed for a positive outcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go line number 6. Doug, you're on the air.
Good morning. How are you?
Best kind, you?
Good. You can hear me fine?
I can.
Yeah, I just got a quick comment about elections, Newfoundland, Labrador, and how to vote. The general public seems to know that, of course, you can vote on October the 14th. There's also been advanced polls in place and also mail-in ballots. But what don't seem to be advertised, and you can't even find on the Newfoundland, Labrador elections website, you can vote any day, any time the election office near you is open. Now, polling stations on polling day, they're specific to your street address, but any elections office that is open, you can go down and vote. Bring your ID. It's done. You don't have to wait for an advance day. You don't have to wait for the 14th. Election Canada can call me on that, but I've had family members that currently work with elections, Newfoundland, Labrador, and have worked with the provincial elections and federal elections in the past. You can vote anytime the office is open.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, advanced polling day is really just opening up the opportunity for the first crack at in-person voting.
Yeah, so it seems like the general public, everybody I can't make it on the 14th, I can't make an advance day, I can't get a mail-in ballot, looks like I'm not going to be able to vote. You go down to your office, you vote whenever you're available, as long as the office is open. That's just my comment. I want everybody to be aware of that.
And I'm glad you made it. Thanks for doing it, Doug.
All right, take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Final word this morning goes to line 2. Rex, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you, Rex?
Not too bad. My question goes out to our government members. I want to know, where's the labor laws to protect the working class? When you get injured through no fault of your own, you are doing what you were told you had to do, and you get injured because of it. Why should you have to suffer abuse and harassment by WSIB and the company? Why, at the age of 65, does the benefit stop, but you still got to deal with the injury?
That's a fair question. I've never really understood the age cutoff issue, to be honest with you. But when you make specific reference to labour laws, can you dig down just one more layer and give us some example of what you're talking about?
When I got injured, we pointed out to him, you didn't have the time or space to do this. And they wanted to have more, but the attitude was you're going to do it anyway. You didn't have a choice.
It's always been one of those things where we're told, but, application in real terms is a bit more tricky than saying, you have the right to refuse unsafe work. People are worried about refusing work, given what the ramifications might be and some of the repercussions. So, it's easy enough to say it, but it's a little bit more difficult to apply it.
For sure it is, yes. And, when you get injured, why you got to go through the abuse and harassment that's put on you? You're injured as it is, but then WSIB, they'll pass you from case manager to case manager, hoping to starve you out or hoping you'll just give up on it. They'll just delay you until hopefully you'll give up on it.
That's long been a problem in, the big guy versus the little guy, whether it be talking criminal justice or otherwise. They have the ability and the money and the time to wait you out.
That's right, yeah. When you got medical documents to prove your injury is legit, but they still, like they told me, that when their doctor put me out for it, they said, oh, that's hereditary. We're not allowing your claim. After working in physical labor all my life, all of a sudden I was born like this?
Yeah, no, obviously not. Rex, I wish we had more time because the injured worker conversations are important. You're welcome to join us again, but we've run right up against the clock.
Okay, and anyway, well, thank you very much. Have a good day.
The same to you, Rex. All the best. Yeah, we can rejoin that conversation. All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.